I was very up to date on my current affairs and also had a lot of. I was a professional quizzer, so I had that advantage which helped me through the prelims initially. So, based on the confidence that I got from the first round, I took the exam again, and then I cleared it. How I had some experiences with Naxalites, and how I had to face some law and order situations. Then in Vijayawada, when I was there were a lot of sand mining issues which were happening. So we used to go out in these nighttime raids to catch those offenders. And then because of that, we could come out with a policy of sand mining, which had a larger impact across the state.
Welcome to JagranJosh.com. Today we have a very special guest on our show. She has been shortlisted for the prestigious Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Public Administration 2020 and is the only officer from Telangana to have been shortlisted for the award in Innovation in Governance category. She is an IAS officer who is known for blending hard work with a creative touch since her days as GHMC Zonal Commissioner. Yes, we are talking about no one else but Miss Hari Chandana Dasari, IAS. Welcome, ma'am, to our show. We are really honored to have you.
Thank you, Jagran Josh, for having me here with you today, and also wishing all the viewers of Jagran Josh more inspiration to come in the years ahead, and also to do well in whatever they set out to do.
So, to begin the interview, ma'am, I would like to ask you, was becoming an IAS officer a childhood dream, or was it a thought that came later in life?
Becoming an IAS officer was not a childhood dream. It was something which I had taken up after I had started my career. So initially, I was thinking of going for a high-paid job and going abroad, settling there. So this was my initial plan. But as one day I was working after graduating from the London School of Economics. I came home one day for vacation, and I was just at home. My father is an ex-civil servant. So one day when he was not there, there was a old person who had come to meet him, a villager from one of the places which he had worked in. So there he was narrating how he was a landless poor person, and due to the efforts of my father who had worked there at that point of time, he could get a couple of acres of land, which now his family is decently well off because of that. So this got me thinking. I was thinking, if I'm working in the private sector, then yes, I would be advancing in my career. I would be having a well-paid job. But the kind of reach that the IAS has, the kind of impact that it can have on people is amazing. So why don't I give it a try? So that's when I took the exam, and I could get through. So that was a lucky part. That made me ponder on my career choices at that point of time, and that I would say is my motivation to get into the service, because the kind of impact that this service can have, no other service across the world can give you that satisfaction of helping somebody. And you never know, a small decision of yours could impact somebody in a small way or in a big way. So this is the kind of thing I wanted for myself. So that's when I took a career U-turn and took the civil service exam.
That's very inspiring, ma'am. Can you elaborate a bit more on why you chose this path of civil services and how you managed to narrow down your career options to this particular option?
So, why did I choose this path? Like I shared earlier, I sat down and I evaluated my career choices, my life choices after I met this individual, like I said before. And then I realized I sat down and thought, what is the kind of job do I want to have? What's the kind of career I want to have? Do I want to have a larger impact? Do I want to be successful in whatever I am doing right now? Then the goals were clear. Also, you know, the vistas that IAS offers, no other service offers in the entire world, I can say. Because today you're doing something, and tomorrow you're doing a completely different thing from what you're doing. But the challenge is in adapting to that new goal that you set. Like, for example, my career, I started out as sub collector Vijayawada. Then it was purely a revenue kind of a job. Then I moved to the Municipal Corporation of Hyderabad, which was a contrast to that job again. And then I moved on to head a district now, which is Narayanpet, which is one of there are a lot of development issues here, and they have so many. It's a budding district, so there are new challenges. So every day this career offers you new challenges, and it's not that today I'm going to do this, my day is set. So you have to be on thinking on your feet, you have to be thinking dynamically, and the things are ever changing. But also, like I said before, the kind of impact your small or big decisions have on a lot of people makes you feel responsible, makes you feel that you know, you have to take a conscious choice of getting into this service. So this was what I had, and since I had a ringside view of the service, being daughter of a civil servant, I knew the problems and the prospects that this service offered. So that's where I took a calculated decision as to what I want to be. And since I wanted to have that career which has an impact, I wanted to have a service, be in a service where I can make a difference. That is why I have taken this decision to take this exam, and thankfully here I am. So hopefully doing my best to fulfill those goals.
There is definitely no doubt about that. So, coming to the civil services exam, can you share with us how did you strategize and prepare for all the three stages of the exam?
So, coming to your strategy about preparing for the exam, the pattern has changed now quite drastically. We did not, when I attempted the exam, we did not have the CSAT. So it was a subject and the general studies in your prelims, and mains were there, and the interview. So three different stages. I think the exam is a reflection of how your service is going to be. You have to be dynamic, you have to change your patterns all the time, and you have to think on your feet. So for the prelims, it is more of an extensive reading that you have, and you need to cover as many bases as possible. That I'm sure is the question, is the trend even now. So you need to keep yourself updated with a lot of current affairs, read a lot of magazines. That in our time, digital modes of knowledge were not so prevalent. So now you have much more access to knowledge via the web. But you need to figure out the right sources. So you need to go with standard sources. For us, having standard papers, reading standard papers like Hindu, Hindustan Times, then Frontline, Outlook, all these magazines were a part of our study schedule. So that was how we prepared for the prelims, and then as we had the subject, intensive subject preparation was required. So on one hand, you have generic studies. For general studies, you need to spread out your education, and for the subject, you need to concentrate and figure out the right questions. So for prelims, I would say I had a very short time. I did not quit my job when I was taking the prelims. So I was working and then appeared for the exam. So to strategize for that, what I did was I took a lot of tests. I was failing miserably in the first few rounds that I took the test, but I kept on taking them, and as much as practice as you can with testing yourself helps, is what I found which helped during the prelims. For mains, again, it comes down to the way you analyze things, and that is the key goal of the mains papers. So any subject you take up, or even general studies, what's happening around the world around you, if you sit down and analyze, if there's a topic, it's not just that we should read it back to back. If we can think about the topic and think about the pros and cons of a particular issue, then and you can also think about the way you are leaning on a particular issue. So once you think on those issues and try to balance out your arguments in your own head and then also put them down on paper, that helps a lot with mains, is what I have found. And since I had a short preparation time, again, this is what I focused, and also intensive analysis of previous years papers helped me understand how the questions are coming, how they are very tuned to the current affairs and the current system of thinking at that point of time. So that is what helps with your mains. For me, that's what helped me with that. And for interview, I was just myself, because I knew that why I wanted to get into the service was very, very clear in my head. So that is something which all of you need to first think about when you appear for your interview. Why you want this service? So that comes across very clearly when you decide to take on the civil services interviews. And also having they are being confident about your views also helps. So this the mains education in fact carries on into your interview preparation. What you have analyzed for mains, how you were appearing for your answers, how you are thinking on issues, if you continue the same thought process, then the interviews are also easy. So and also practicing interviews. If you are not a confident person talking to a lot of people, then talking in front of the mirror, or just talking to your friends and answering a couple of interviews yourself increases your level of confidence, and that takes you forward. So that was my preparation strategy. It was a long back, but I think the goal of the civil services remains the same. So if you think that this is how I should prepare, that's how. If you have the plan chalked out initially from the word go, this is how I'm going to prepare for prelims, and don't stop when you give the prelims. That is my another takeaway from my exams. I was not very, I didn't know if I would clear the prelims also, because that was my first attempt. But again, I thought it doesn't matter, and I kept on studying for my mains. So that helped, because once you suddenly clear, you have a very little time to do that.
That was very insightful. So, what were your optional subjects for the exam?
I have chosen public administration, which I trained through my graduation throughout on that. And also I took up anthropology because it was an easy subject at that point of time to handle, and the material was short. And also being from a humanities background, attempting humanities subjects was more, I could vibe with the subjects. So that's when I decided to do that. It's also not right for people to just take a subject just because it is the most popular one. You just go through the material first, and then see if it is if you are able to understand it, if you have some interest towards that subject. And once you figure out that, then you just stick to it and keep attempting on that.
So, what challenges did you face while preparing for the exam?
So like I said earlier, the challenges when you face this exam, first is you should have an analysis of the situation that you are in. Some people will have, they must be in a rural area, they will not be able to access information or go to an institute. Then how do you access the information online? So these are things which you need to plan out. For me, the challenge was that at that point of time, I did not quit my job. So I was working in the private sector, and I had a really tough job, which was not just 9 to 5. It was up to, I was working about 14-15 hours a day. So I just had very little gap periods to study, weekends, or 2-3 hours per day. So that's when I had to strategize and plan out my schedule. I had to figure out how I'm going. This is the material I have to read. This is the ground I have to cover, and I that's what I did. I sat down. I analyzed how much time am I going to have each day. Sometimes these, even if you think that you have 4 hours, because of various reasons, something happens. You will not have 1 hour, or something. You go out and then you lose that few hours that you have. So you need to plan this and break down your schedule. So if I had a week, I decided that this is what I'm going to do in a month. This is what I'm going to do in a week. Then this is my day-wise schedule. So that's how I broke up my schedules, and I started preparing accordingly and make my plan. So I'm a fast reader, so I knew I could cover more ground reading faster. So, and I could prepare better on my own than listening to video classes or audio classes. So I balanced it out. Maybe a few days, Saturdays or Sundays, whichever was difficult areas for me, I would take the help of some institutes, teachers, and talk to them and sort out my problem issues. But on the other days, I would plan out with my job how I will do my studies. So, like I said, the SWOT analysis is very important for all of us, and we need to take that and plan out your schedules.
How well did you take the failure of the first attempt, and what kept you going?
Actually, I did not fail my first attempt. I was through the my first attempt. I got into the IRS in 2009, and then I moved on to the IAS in 2010. I took the exam again. I did not join the service. So I was confident that with whatever preparation half and the time that I had, I almost did it in 5-6 months. It's not something which I would advise people who are not into the preparation mode. But before this, I would say I had an advantage that I was very up to date on my current affairs, and also had a lot of, I was a professional quizzer, so I had that advantage which helped me through the prelims initially. So based on the confidence that I got from the first round, I took the exam again, and then I cleared it. So there you go.
It is usually said that an IAS aspirant should study for about at least 16 to 18 hours every day to qualify for the exam. So, what is your take on this?
So I don't believe that 16 to 18 hours of study is required. Like I said, I could only squeeze in about 3-4 hours of study during the time I've taken the exam. So afterwards, I could do about 6 to 7 hours, but with due breaks. And I would say continuously studying is also not good for your mental health. You need to take breaks. You need to actually have some physical activity also when you're doing this, because this exam is so intensive. It takes a lot from you. So you need to be at your peak physical and mental performance when you take this. So I would advise taking breaks. I would say that go out, observe things, and come back. And you'll come back to your reading with a fresh perspective. And like I said, some people may require 16 to 18 hours of study, because they would be not confident in their subject. They don't know how to approach the subject. They're studying newly, or this is something which they have never done in their life. So then maybe, but I wouldn't frankly advise 16 to 18 hours of study. I'm sure if you plan out, again, like I said, planning is crucial, and analyzing in the beginning itself when you take on a subject is quite crucial to this exam.
That's very insightful, ma'am. So, according to you, what is the biggest myth about civil services?
The first, it relates to your previous question, 16 to 18 hours of study, continuous study, and intensive study. That's one. Then most people say, you have to be very lucky to get into civil services. That's another myth. And the only highly intelligent people, or people who have extremely high academic profiles, get into the civil services. These are some of the myths that have been told to all of us, I'm sure. So, like I answered with the first one, 16 to 18 hours of education of study is not needed, because you are, it depends on how you are and how you study and how you plan out your schedule, like I said again. And coming to the lucky part, I would say IAS is more about 90% hard work and 10% luck. So, unless you are working hard towards your goal, unless you are struggling to see that you fulfill your ambition, your life ambition, the IS is a difficult thing just by luck. So, luck factors in when you are talking about your cadre, maybe when you are talking about an interview, and a few marks in an interview again. I wouldn't say many, but few marks do make a difference in terms of giving you the service that you want. But if you put extreme hard work and if you put your dedication and faith towards achieving your goals, I'm sure all of us will achieve what we set out. For some, it may take a few years. For some, it may take a lesser time. But you just have to keep trying, and you just have to aspire enough for it, for the job to be yours.
Even after 70 years of independence, why do you think civil services is still considered as the most coveted service in India?
Like I said earlier, the why civil services is still relevant is because it's a generalist service. So, I mean, if you ask a civil servant, what are you an expert in? They would probably say, some of them would not be very efficient specialists in a few departments, but they would have a generalistic overview of everything. They would know how to get things done. So if you ask a civil servant, what's your expertise? It's about, I would say the first thing is getting things done. And also manpower management, how you motivate your team, how you take along your team to achieve a set goal, is what keeps the civil services going. And over the years, this service is like Sardar Patel has rightly pointed out, that this is the steel frame of India. And the steel frame is still there. There are some values, there are some aspirations, and when every day, even daily, I see public coming to meet me, and they think, okay, you're an IS officer, you're supposed to solve this. So that is a faith that people have in this service, which has been sustaining across the years. They expect you to do things, get things done, and also solve their problems. So that way, I think, is the charm of this service. And it's still enduring, because the civil servants who have come across the ages have kept the charm going, and the philosophy going. So you end up helping people, you end up changing lives, you end up impacting different policies, or at the ground level too, you end up seeing how these programs and policies reach people in an efficient manner. So you are changing things daily with your work, and that is the enduring charm of this service.
So, what are some of the typical challenges that a civil services officer faces during service?
So challenges are there in all the jobs that you take on, but there are different types of challenges in this job, and no officer will tell you that they have gone through the same challenge. Of course, my during my career, my training time, when I was posted in this place, an Naxal infested area during my training days. So then suddenly the police came and they said, ma'am, you have to leave this place. And they took me back to the district headquarters. After I came to the headquarters, I was told that there was a Naxal kidnapping attempt planned in that area. So that was really off-putting at that point of time, and then it was a kind of risky what you felt during training. Then again, during my first posting as a collector Vijayawada, I was just thrust into a law and order situation in the first week of my joining there. So there was a shootout which happened, and the police station was geared because of the shootout. The villagers were very angry at the police, so they had just locked them into their room, and they were not letting them out, and they were trying to beat them up. So I just went into the situation as an executive magistrate. I had to be there. So I just went there, and then suddenly I saw all these villagers with those sticks and stones, and very agitated crowd. So I just reacted on my feet, and I saw women who were protesting there. So I just went and sat with them and started talking to them, listening to their problems, and we just spent about 3-4 hours on that. And then the reinforcements arrived, the police and the senior officers and everybody who can deal with the situation, and then the situation subsided. So every officer will tell you different stories about how they have faced different challenges in their career. So nothing, no day is similar in this job. So that's a sacrifice in some ways, where you're spending your family time. You are not doing a 9 to 5 job. You are doing a 24/7 job sometimes, and also you are spending a lot of your family time towards your office. But then how do you integrate it into your life, and to start living this life becomes important in this scenario. So for me now, sometimes my staff become my extended family. They take care of my child when I'm unable to do that, and then it's how effectively you start living with your team, and how your job, your professional and personal life blur in this job. So sometimes you have to just balance out both of them. So that's a challenge for some, but it just depends on what you want and how you want to handle your career path.
So, coming to your journey, how have the past 10 years been for you as an IAS officer?
So the last 10 years have been a very interesting journey for me. In terms of jobs, I have not changed many jobs. I've been sub-collector Vijayawada. Then I was posted for a long time as municipal commissioner in Hyderabad. And then for the past 1 year, I'm serving as collector and DM Narayanpet. So it's been an interesting journey. And I would say that have I been able to achieve what I set out initially? Yes, I would say that very much. You do have challenges, you do have pressures, you do have people saying that, this happens, that happens. Sometimes you have to change your decisions on the go. But apart from that, the larger impact I could have and the larger goals I could reach, I'm a person who's very passionate about environmental issues personally. So even in my last job, I could see that I could make an impact on that, and Hyderabad has seen some changes because of that time that I could take out in my career. So that has been an excellent time, I would say. And there are some things, sometimes you cannot achieve whatever you set out to. But by and large, I could say that the last 10 years have been interesting up and down. Like I said, the previously, how I had some experiences with Naxalites, and how I had to face some law and order situations. Then in Vijayawada, when I was there were a lot of sand mining issues which were happening. So we used to go out in these nighttime raids to catch those offenders. And then because of that, we could come out with a policy of sand mining, which had a larger impact across the state. So even the other issues that I could take up, the sustainable development initiatives, have had a long-term impact. So that gives you a lot of satisfaction. So there have been challenges, there have been problems, but there have also been a lot of self-satisfaction that I could do something.
Wow, that is truly great to hear. So, we've also learned that you've been actively advocating the process of green governance throughout your districts. What was the inspiration behind this?
Coming on green governance, I think, like I said, what has been my personal belief and personal passion, I could find an opportunity through my job to take it to a larger, wider audience. So, when I started out in Vijayawada, my role was typically more of a revenue officer and more regulatory. So, when I was dealing there, the sand mining issues kept on happening, and a lot of environmental impact because of sand mining was felt on the Krishna River, and which was the jurisdictional area of mine there. So I was trying to regulate it more, but then we realized that more than regulation, if there is a lot of a proper framework, and also a kind of a rule framework which can uh, eliminate the need for regulation, that is a better option. So that started my green journey, I would say. And being in Hyderabad gave me wings in that direction, because the job profile itself included sustainability, sanitation issues, and environmental impact. So because the job was like that, first I started reading about it, reading about these issues and the kind of impact that you see. So seeing a dump yard for the first time, I was born and brought up in Hyderabad, but I've never seen where my trash goes. So when I went to the dump yard and saw the way that the trash was piled up at that point of time, now it's not there. We could manage to remove all the trash and convert them to waste to energy projects now. But when I had initially joined, and that was my first experience of seeing that, then I felt this is what my city is doing to itself. So that's when we thought we had to bring it to the larger audience. And once we started talking about these initiatives and taking them to the public also responded positively on these green governance initiatives. So initially, just to motivate public, we started showing them how recycling can be a way of life. And we showed them how to make furniture out of recycled items, how to make tiles out of recycled plastic, and make roads out of recycled plastic. And once we started using them, not only were we managing our the job better, we were also motivating more people to come forward to do this. So very happy to see that after these efforts, a lot of private entrepreneurship had cropped up in Hyderabad, who were trying to manage waste individually with communities and with public institutions. So this was a kind of interest, and where you could take a lot of people along with you. So that gave a lot of satisfaction to me personally also. And coming to the district, also we could do a lot of greening initiatives here, because there's a lot of land available, there's space available. So your job, you have to react to the situation that you are in. So if you are, when I was placed in the municipal corporation, I had a lot of chances to work on sustainable issues, waste management issues. So that's how my thinking was, and how I could incorporate even my education. I had when I had studied in Europe, the thought process there was more about environmental impact of a lot of decisions, and how you can make things better in terms of green governance. So I could bring my education into play, and practically implement some of those things which I was thinking about during my preparation days, or even during my education days.
That's very encouraging. So, before we conclude today's interview, any advice or suggestions that you can give to the current civil services aspirants?
The first and last thing I would tell any civil service aspirant is believe in yourself, believe that you can. Because first is the most important thing is conviction in yourself. You can have a lot of handicaps, you can come from different backgrounds, you can come from different problem sets in your life. But the thing is, you have to strongly believe that you can achieve something you set out to, and then you make and then you plan out your path to achieve that. I'm sure all of us, once we have that belief, is the strongest thing we have in our lives. and once we believe we can, we will definitely set out towards that direction, and also follow the conviction to follow that path you set on. So sometimes things, obstacles come in between. We don't like, we think, okay, this is not my cup of tea, and then try to move on. But unless you've given your 100, I would say 200% to something, and then still, if you do not make it, then you can move on to a different path. But do give that 200% of yourself to whatever you set out to achieve. Wishing you all the very best, and hopefully seeing many more of you coming into the civil services and other professional careers.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking our time to talk to our viewers and for sharing information that we are sure will help future civil services aspirants. We wish you the best and we hope to have you again on jagranjosh.com. Thank you so much.